What is that noise? I hear a beat. I hear some grinding guitars. I see Bo with his red glasses on today. Watch out.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Ooh, air horns for Advent. Lots of them. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about, Bo.
It is time to get your nerd out.
Yeah.
Let your nerd flag fly.
Ooh, your nerd flag.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. What color is your nerd flag?
Whatever the zestiest of colors is.
Oh, it's orange. I'm just okay.
So,
Bo, you were asking the wrong person who both got his orange pen, his orange hat, his orange coffee mug, and even an orange iPad cover.
Why did I not know?
Computer orange. Bo, the logo is orange.
Why did I not know that you were so monochromatic when it came to this issue?
Well, I don't know. How many times have you seen an orange monk in a website that you posted blogs on that's orange?
I have never put this together before.
Man, Bo, I love orange. And I don't, honestly, I'm not even really sure why I like orange. It wasn't like I was sitting there one day and was like, I just like orange stuff. I got to a point where I had so many orange things that just, I'm going to get this one.
Huh.
That when we were, Elgin was little and, well, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite color? And he's like, well, Dad's is orange. And I was like, yeah, it is. It is orange.
That is interesting.
I know. So like when our local minor league team, the Grasshoppers, their new hat this season, because orange used to be their flair color, but they had like a special hat that they're orange, the accent color is the dominant one. I'm like, I'm getting this junk. Sometimes, Bo, I wear this hat.
Yeah.
And my orange Vans at the same time.
Wow, man. You're committed. You're doubling down.
I think I need to get okay. I don't even know if this is possible. And I don't know if anyone other than me would wear it, but I want this hat with the monk there. Yeah. It's, I wear hats a lot more now that my hair's thinning. And I look at
pretty thick. You have a mop up there, man.
But look at this. See,
Lori says she thought it was a turtle.
It's a grasshopper. The Greensboro Grasshoppers.
Ah, I see.
Our local minor league team. I love going to baseball games.
Yeah.
I mean, I like baseball. It's my like favorite sport to go watch.
Interesting.
Because it is just like a hang,
Yeah.
If I go with one person to a basketball game who is into the game, then I love it. But if you're a dad and you're going to sporting events, you're half the time you're going in line to go get them something or going to the bathroom, and you don't want to be like that dad and be like, look, this is a basketball game.
Yeah.
Like you can wait till halftime or chill out. So I like football games for tailgating. And if you're a Wake Forest alumni like myself and moved back here, we went to quite a few games, and we're so bad you don't have to worry about the game, But
speaking of football and orange, I will be cheering against all orange-oriented teams like Tennessee this weekend.
I understand.
Yeah,
it's reasonable. Do you have like random friends that are attached to particular schools in college?
Oh yeah.
So you have to decide, like, do you want them to lose because their venting Facebook post is just so funny? You're like, you're a professional philosopher, but Aaron Simmons, when Florida State has like the third most expensive college team and can't get to 500, your angry posts about how bad they are is just half the entertainment.
I feel that way about Duke grads. I have so many cool
Y
people in my life, and when the Dookies are bad, they're pretty miserable.
I have a now growing up in North Carolina, college basketball or NASCAR are, like, the
Oh,
2 sports that, if you count NASCAR,
I was
but
gonna say it's more of an activity, but yes.
yeah, well, I'm just glad the Venn diagram of NASCAR supporters and this podcast are not here, or our chat would get blown up with, "Do you understand?" I
The
I
core
some
strength, it
sometimes
takes
I
to
do it
turn left.
just for
Yeah,
fun with certain friends. I bring it up and be like,
yeah.
"I mean, they just drive in circles." "Wait, what do you mean?" They're like, "Do you know?" But, um,
Are
yeah.
you, are you ready for Christmas Trip?
Ooh, um, I'm ready so today, going to a 5th grade Christmas party in a little bit,
Okay, okay.
and then, my niece is,
Oh,
is having a sleepover with Cora,
nice.
so, that's
That's
gonna be a
beautiful.
party, so we're going to pick her up, and then tonight is the state championship high school football game,
Really?
and currently, I'm the parent going with a number of 17-year-old boys
Oh, wow.
to, supervise, and by
I
that, I
can
mean probably watch the game by myself
yeah.
it's
I
at
can
the
s
UNC football stadium,
I can
so
smell the Axe body spray from here.
but it's funny because, most parents, when it's like when, you're on a text thread with parents, it's like, "Oh, it's in Chapel Hill, blah, 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 blah," and and then it's like, "Well, Tripp was a youth minister for a long time, he digs this stuff."
Nice.
Hey, could you run a Quiz Bowl game at our kid's birthday party like you did at
Oh,
Owen's?
how did the quiz go?
It was good. It was good.
Was it a hit?
It was a 2-point margin by the end. It was an
Mm.
intense battle, and, one of the YouTube videos that I watched to get really cool trivia about Fortnite was wrong, and
Oh,
it
no.
generated, this opportunity to discuss the nature of truth, um, and well, is it correct because everyone here that plays the game all the time tells me it is, or is it correct because I wrote the answer down and this is what's
Oh,
there?
that's fun.
Actually,
Um,
it wasn't fun. They said, "Dad, come on, just move on."
can I tell you an interesting story about that's actually flavoring my Christmas prep?
Yeah?
I promise it has a theological nerdiness to it.
I mean, I like look, Bo, half of this is theological nerdiness, the other half is talking to you. So,
Sure.
you just tell me.
At Bible study a couple weeks ago, we're in Ephesians, and we always do this exercise at the end of our Bible study where I ask, is there anything you're glad you heard someone else say tonight? So that's the first half of the exercise is you can't quote yourself, but you have to say if you heard something from someone else that a light bulb came on, whatever. The second half of the exercise, I always ask, did any bruises get poked? Any feathers get ruffled? Do you have any rocks in your sandals as we walk away? Because that's a discipleship question.
Yeah.
Somebody brought up that they really don't like the idea of the resurrection of the dead. It had come up because Paul's split between body and spirit rubs some people the wrong way. That anything to do with the flesh is bad, and what you really want to focus on is your spiritual health, right? And so somebody brought up the resurrection of the dead and how it's sort of an objectionable idea. And while I agree on some level, I found myself sticking up for it, not to be just a contrarian, but because I said, look, we're getting ready for Christmas. The body really matters. And as Elizabeth Johnson taught us, our language about God functions. And so I was thinking, what's the function of the resurrection of the dead? Like if some people believe it's bodily. And while I am concerned about that as well, because of my rapture background and just the complicated physics to try and comprehend, you know, especially for those now who have been cremated, you know, but obviously a God who can create ex nihilo, which I think is also a concerning idea. But if you do believe that,
You had people in an Ephesians Bible study going like, "But just to clarify about ex nihilo." That is
yes,
a niche Bible study.
it is a very nerdy, yes. So long story short, I found myself sticking up for the bodily resurrection as a function, how it functions in our theology, because I said getting ready for Christmas, the body really matters. That's one of the big lessons of Christmas is incarnation. And it has sent me, Tripp, over the last 3 weeks down a rabbit hole about the carnal, the carne asada, the incarnation, right? The sins of the flesh, uh, the carcass, that God's concerned for the carcass,
Uh-huh.
right? That you're not just a spirit, and that's the part that gets to live with God forever, and that you're somehow trapped in this mud body, right? We're not, that's like a type of Gnosticism, reduct that I'm not interested in. But the incarnation is one of the most beautiful concepts that the word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? That the logos was embodied and fleshed. And I got so excited about Christmas. So I've
Yeah.
been thinking about I've been
I
thinking about it for 3 weeks, and I have a whole bunch of ideas I want to run past you.
Oh, this would be fun. This would be fun. The, I you know, I also just want you to know that once when I looked on here and saw the title again, In-Carnitas, that I'm hungry.
I know. I listen. I've been up for 3 hours already, and thinking about this topic. I am gonna go get a burrito after this.
Mm. Do they have burritos where you live?
Surprise trip because we're an agricultural. Um,
Ah.
yes, we have an amazing ethnic food variety here.
Well, since it's close to Christmas, I feel like there's going to be the tamales option, right? That was my favorite in Redondo. Once it gets to Advent, the volume of
Yes,
tamale sales
that's true.
at the um at the boardwalk, where they have like the farmers
Yeah,
market,
yeah.
you'll get your fresh fruit and vegetables. But then holiday season, they're like, "Do you want tamales? Do you want to make an order for Christmas?" And I'm like,
Yes.
"Yeah."
We decorated our Christmas tree a couple weeks ago, and one of the ornaments that I look forward to the most comes in a velvet box. It has its own box that it's stored in, and it was a gift from my former senior pastor, John Woodall, when I was at Westwood in West LA. So I texted him and said, "Hey, every time I'm decorating my tree and this ornament comes out, it makes me think of you. Also, whenever I have tamales, because when we would have our staff Christmas parties, it was always tamales. When I have tamales, I also think of you." And he's like, "That's an interesting association." But it's
You know,
true.
okay, Christmas ornament aside, all
Yeah.
right? I got sent this.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it glows in the dark.
Stop.
Yeah.
Are you for our listeners, not everybody's on a viewer today. For our listeners, tell us what we're looking at here. It's a door
Yeah, it's a
with
special
some
door.
elvish.
Yeah, Elvish script on the top.
Yeah.
And in order to go through this door, in
Oh,
into Moria, you have to speak friend and enter. Um, and and someone made this with, like, a 3D printer for me.
no way.
Yeah,
Come on.
and you say to yourself, when whoever it was that invented 3D printing, did they know, that someone would print Elvish script on it for a glow in the dark Christmas ornament? Um I don't know, but it happened.
That is the most specific Christmas ornament I've ever seen.
Yeah, on, let's see if you can see it. All the you see the red all the way at the top there?
Yeah.
So at the Algae Beer Camp, um, w one of the, elder attendees' grandkids made a, um, 3D printed Smaug for me. And so I don't know if this is the same person because it didn't have it just said, "Merry Christmas, hope you enjoyed on your tree." And it was, like, from a deacon, so whoever it is, I just wanna say
Wow.
thank you. Um, and I thought it was cool and stuff, and then I come into my office 2 nights ago to grab something, and it's glowing on my desk, and
That's
I was just like, it's one thing that you're like, "Oh, this is cool, the gates of
yeah.
Moria, blah, blah,"
Yeah.
this kind of thing, and then it's glowing, and I'm like, "It glows in the dark? This is amazing." Anyway, sorry for the extended aside there. Um
No. Sometimes I try and, think through, like, if somebody's listening to this show for the first time,
Mhm.
the amount of inside baseball knowledge that you'd have to have, like, you just referenced a deacon, but somebody may be like, "I don't I don't even know what that
Oh, yeah,
is."
we just ordained all the listeners for probably 12 years.
Yeah.
It was being Baptist, obnoxiously Baptist, where you're ordained at your baptism, you're a priest of the believer, so I just called everyone a deacon, and then when we started the member group, it was like, how much ever you donated each month, you could have a whole new title, and, uh, and at least once a month, there's always some, like, Episcopalian that's just like, "You you can't donate each month and become a bishop," and I'm like, "Yeah, you can."
Watch us.
I mailed someone a certificate once. They were like, "Can I have a certificate that says I'm a bishop?" And I was like, "Why do you want that?" He's like, My wife's Episcopalian, and I'm kind of a agnostic, but I just thought
Yep.
it'd be funny to stick it above my computer." And I'm like,
I was at a
"Alright."
cl I was at a clergy gathering earlier this week, and somebody was telling a story, and she said, that she was doing a funeral with another pastor in town, and, um, there was some concern about, you know, this is a queer clergy person, and there was some concern around her sexual identity, and, she was telling a story, and it came out that the other minister is a Baptist, and the whole room sort of locked up, and she goes, "No, no, no, American Baptist." And I was like, "If you don't know the difference in your Baptist, you may," but the whole room literally goes, "Oh," at the same time. It was
Exhale.
yeah, like, "Oh, exhale, yeah, okay, okay."
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
I've been in that position quite a few times.
You have to
The best
clarify.
is when people don't believe you're Baptist, and they're like, "You're not Baptist." I'm like, "Dude, I'm Baptist AF. Like, you need to get recommitted right now in living water? Like, let's find a river, man. Let's go." Alright. You wanna talk about flesh.
I do wanna talk about flesh.
I was just distracted by my glow in the dark ornament.
No, I rightly so, that was very distracting. It's a beautiful gift. Um, so, yeah, let's let our flesh flag fly. That's what I meant to say at the beginning, but I got stuck on the
Oh, the Bow Daddy wants to let his flesh flag fly.
Joshua Patterson loves the Baptist AF.
Yeah.
Um, Tripp, there's 3 things that come to my mind, implications of the incarnation
Mm,
for that I'd like to flesh out in this conversation.
really? I came up
What?
with 4, so we'll see if there's overlap. This would be fun. This would
Okay.
be fun.
Okay. Um, the first
Flesh Flag could be a progressive Christian punk band. Just saying.
oh, yes, I love it. Um, so the first thing that I always think of when it comes to, issues of incarnation is In my academic life, I am, and in my ecclesial life, I am a committed feminist ally. Now, some people don't know why you have to say ally, and it's because in the academic world, I can't be a feminist. That's just my social location and identity don't allow that. The best I can be is an ally. So I am a feminist ally, committed. I left my first denomination over the issue of women in ministry. I'm committed. And one of the thing that feminist theologians, scholars, writers, authors, thinkers have helped me realize is that the experience of being human, the the truth of what we proclaim in the incarnation is the validation of the human experience, and that your enfleshment, embodied practice and reception of the grace and the spirit of the divine, right, is the heart of this gospel that we have. That it's not just that God so loved the whole world, it's that God, the love, is embodied in this person, right, that we proclaim. And one of the implications is that whether you believe in the ancient concept of theosis, right, that but to be able to embrace the fact that God, the divine, was embodied, infleshed, right? Incarnate means that there is a validation that whatever concept you've been given of the gap between some transcendent, eternal, holy other, but that gap was closed when God drew near and not just embraced humanity, but took on the very flesh. Like, there is something so profound about our human experience that God doesn't shy away or distance or banish, right, in the ways that so many people have been taught. But the truth of Christmas, one of the implications is that God drew near, embraced creation, and enfleshed, embodied, incarnate. This it's you can't even exhaust how profound and unique this concept is.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I dig it.
Yeah.
I endorse, retweet. Um, one of the things that actually came to my mind is because you mentioned Elizabeth Johnson,
Yeah.
earlier, which, by the way, is, uh, like, legendary feminist theologian, Catholic, she who is one of the greatest books. Um, but, also she writes great theology texts that are for, a more general audience.
Okay.
Has been on the podcast a number of times, and when
Yeah.
we did the big, session at AAR, um, it's also on the podcast, kind of honoring her, and,
Mhm.
so if people aren't familiar, you should just check those episodes out. But one of the things that, when talking about the incarnation, uh, and, some pushbacks to it is like, "Well, why did God become a male?" And
Okay.
she goes, "Well, that's because if the incarnate one had been a female, then a female would have been the mother of God and also the daughter of God, and men would have just been left out altogether." And so, it and she's has a beautiful book on Mary, but, part of that kind of the treasuring of flesh in the incarnation is part of it
Mhm.
is, like, the fullness of being human, but then that a mother,
Yeah.
Mary is the mother of God,
Yeah.
and Jesus, the Son of God. I if you divided the job description up differently, you couldn't have had both male and female a part of it. And,
Oh, interesting.
should you a part of the critique of the minimizing of Mary's role
Yeah.
in Protestant life, is that you miss Yeah, you might not be into the metaphysics of getting around to Mary being the mother of God and all that kind of thing, but that the narrative of God taking up flesh, um, it is impossible without Mary's participation.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, yeah."
I think it was in 2009, I heard Elizabeth Johnson for the first time on Homeward Christianity, and she was talking about sarx,
Mhm.
S-A-R-X, and flesh, and it so impacted me that it changed the way I thought about Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those that don't know, sarx is the Greek word for just, like, fleshly reality. It's not even you could have picked something that's just the human body,
Yeah.
right? And so in one of her later works, um, uh, the beast has the beast in the title. It's the quote from Job about "Ask the beast." There you go, "Ask the beast."
Oh,
Um,
the beast of the
and in
field.
the eco-Christology section, is that yeah, we proclaim the incarnation, and that's in part because human beings are the ones with language and symbolic language and stuff, but we're part of a whole evolutionary history, and when you read the prologue of John, the word didn't become, a human, it became sarx, and there's, like, all of the cosmic story is sarxing. And so when
Mm,
the word sarxes,
mm,
we proclaim the incarnation, but it is like we're consciously proclaiming something of God coming to treasure flesh, not just the human. And yeah, so and I think underneath that is this sense. One way I might even think about what you're saying is that flesh is treasured as flesh by God,
mm,
right? And so a lot of times um, people think of the coming of God as a means of escaping fleshly reality as
mm,
opposed to the divine embracing it. Or like you mentioned earlier, like some people will take it as like, oh, well, it's this kind of gnosis, and a movement away from the flesh as opposed to theosis, the
mm,
transformation of flesh into the divine life.
mm.
And I think and this is something Elizabeth Johnson talks about is that the resonant harmony of Jesus and the one he called Abba, and that kind of resonance where he images the invisible God in his life. The resurrection is God's statement that what happened there is the future for all
Mm.
flesh, right? And so there's this sense that you misunderstand what is seen in the cross and proclaimed in the resurrection if you don't understand that the incarnation is God's
Mm.
treasuring of flesh
Wow.
as the embracing of finitude into the divine life, not a kind of escape
There you
logic.
go. Yeah, because the difference between like a Gnostic approach, right, and this thing we're talking about is that um knowledge, right, the gnosis, but embodied, right, incarnate and fleshed, right, is a completely different ball game. By the way, Patricia has a good point that if Christ had been female, her ministry would have lasted about 20 minutes before guys picked up rocks and started tossing. Oh, which reminds me of a quote by Catherine Keller that you've recently introduced me to, which is that the wounds of God become the womb of new creation. And it brought back to my mind for the last couple of weeks when Catherine Keller talks about the Korah. So when you have the perichoresis, which is this picture of the Godhead, this dance around the perimeter, uh, the choresis, right, the choreograph, the perimeter, the middle, the vacated middle of the preferred other is a Korah. It is uh, a cup, a vessel, right? It is also the same thing as the cup we use in communion, the cup of Christ, which is right that love poured out in service to the many, right? It's that same sort of imagery and the same thing as the womb of Mary. May it be unto me as you have said, right? So for me, the paracretic picture of the Godhead, the communion table where we gather as equals, and the womb of willingness, may it be unto me as you had said, all of these things to me point in this same direction of new creation. And uh, not a God who distances from her creation, but one who draws near, embraces, and goes even a step beyond to embody, right? Like for me, all of this, it's Christmas imagery through and through.
Oh, well, look, as someone whose daughter is named Cora, you don't have to tell me.
Oh,
It
that's the trump card in this conversation.
No, no, I love it, and, here's one of the reasons, I mean, and Cora in philosophy has this its own lineage, and then how it has been picked up a number of times theologically is real fascinating, right? Because like the Cora in Plato's dialogues is the kind of the principle of suchness, that which all things participate in and none of them particularize. It's the receptacle philosophically, or in Whitehead, creativity. Um, and like when that Cora concept gets picked up by the Cappadocians, uh, the when thinking about the Trinity, right? So you have like the divine energies dancing, the energy of the divine, um, and that gets explained with the Cora and then connected to the cup. Part of what's being confessed that we learn in the incarnation, especially in the Cappadocians, is that kind of formless potential and possibility is not something apart from the divine life that God comes into to attempt to shape, right? Like as some external thing. The potential and possibility is the energetic flow of the divine life, right? And so it sets up this sense where you could, take the Cora and then like, okay, God relates to the
Mm,
world and or
mm,
possibilities this way, and like, oh, you should do this or do this or do this, as opposed to it is the very divine life that generates the possibility of
mm,
potential and possibility, and then God invests God's self
mm.
into it to have this kind of reciprocity, right? Coming to participate
Yeah.
in the flow of these possibilities and such. And I think when it like one of the things that that helps communicate is that a lot of times people see the incarnation as a statement about the partitioning of reality, like, oh,
Mm,
well, now God's here, right?
mm,
And maybe you got to get on the right side of it, because now that the world's been partitioned as like the God part and not God part, um, then I mean, you can see how this plays out in so many pictures of salvation. Like, oh, well, you got to get on the right side. But
yeah.
the moment the choratic context of it, it's not about the partitioning of reality; it's the participation of reality. It's humming potential is already nested in the divine life. And so it is an invitation to deeper participation, right?
Mm,
Which is why the Cappadocians and then it get picked up rather like that connection between the energetic hum of God and God's self, the triune dance. Then where do we find it? In the cup of the Eucharist. So like, what are you taking into yourself? Right? It is this participation image. And
mm.
anyway, I think it's awesome, and I'm gonna not go into an excursus on how Heidegger and Derrida use
Okay.
the Quora.
But another implication of this is that a lot of liberal Protestants are allergic to blood and blood imagery. It makes them queasy, mostly because evangelicals and charismatics fundamentalists have overdone it on the sacrificial, right? The whether it's substitutionary atonement or redemptive violence, they've so overdone it, especially with the horrific violence of the 20th century, that a lot of liberal Protestants have become quite allergic to blood. But the caution is that when we talk about blood, we need to be careful that we're not just talking about the events of Good Friday. We're also talking about Christmas, because childbirth, right? It's not just that the blood shed, right, on the cross, that birth is a messy business and there's blood involved. And it is through blood that God was born into the world, blood and water, right? And so when they stab his side and blood and water flow, but that's not the first time that imagery should be in our head. There's also a Christmas connection that when God was the divine was birthed into the world, there's also blood and water involved.
Ooh. Okay. I wanna tell you something I got in an email about
All right.
this that if I
Okay.
was preaching, I would use. So this is
Okay.
free, uh, you know, free material because I don't have a sermon coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
Apparently, people don't ask for guest preachers at Christmas.
I call it whatever you're about to say. I call it. I get to use it.
Okay, so I got an email from a doula, so
Oh,
someone who goes through the birthing process with people and stuff, and it was in response to one of the podcasts that where we had talked about, like, the challenges facing the American church and all the stuff on the horizon, and,
okay.
I can't remember what guest it was, but, uh, they had said, um, "Well, it looks like we're in for a shitstorm," right, was the line, and the doula said, um, "One of the things you learn journeying, with parents through the birthing process is that the shit comes right before the baby." And she's like, that's how I'm processing Advent this year,
Wow.
is that the body before the blood and the water and the baby,
Yeah.
um, you empty things. And that's one of the most important signs to pay attention to when you're trying to help a mother in the birthing process know what time it
Mm,
is when the defecation happens right
wow.
before it. And so and she goes, "So maybe, there's some Advent wisdom you can learn from a doula,
Mm,
that defecation,
mm.
is a sign that the waiting is about to give birth to something new."
Wow.
And it's what we've been waiting for. And I was like, "Oh, chunk. Somebody needs to ask Amanda preach." D c and you could just imagine, like, you can tell a story about, oh, probably I would pick, whoever in the congregation that I know's had new babies, and I got to be there because that's one of the coolest parts of being a minister. You get called to hospital on a lot of difficult situations. So when someone's like, "Junk's going down, you wanna meet the new baby," you're like, "Hell yeah." So, like, they're sitting there, and there's all this promise. You're thinking about little baby Jesus, and, you could tell those stories, tell the doula story, then tell the current situation, and then be like, "Boom shakalaka." Maybe out of wisdom of the doula. And what is the church doing, in this time? And anyway, I was just like, "This
I
is great."
I like that person's take on this a lot more than that inappropriate joke you used to tell where a disciple slips on diarrhea.
Oh,
Didn't you used to tell a
oh, it's my theology joke.
off-color
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Peter and the disciples, they're all hanging out with Jesus, and, they ended up with some bad fish, and, Peter's like, "Fellas, I'll be back," and he goes off into a bush and just lets loose, and then Jesus is like, Pete, that's what I'm talking about. It's got me," and you can tell the story as long as you want, but after Jesus goes, someone else it hits them, you know, and they go off right after Jesus, and they
Oh my
slip on it,
gosh.
you know, and and then
I'm I'm
and they
regretting bringing this
and the
up.
disciple says, "Holy shit," because they slipped in Jesus's poo, and then Jesus goes, "Shh, don't tell anyone." It's the messianic secret joke
I
from the
see that. Yeah.
synoptics.
No,
That's
I remember. I also remember that people objected and that you said, "If you don't think Jesus had, dietary issues and GI
uh-huh.
distress, then you don't believe that he was fully human,"
Yeah, yeah, and,
which is
in my first book, I didn't how they go through a
did
last
you
pass
tell
on
that joke
editing.
in the first
No,
book?
no, no,
Oh,
in the Homebrew Christianity Guide to Jesus, I talk about how my roommate and I in college, we were both philosophy and religion majors, so if we had, like, a good argument, we thought if we played each other in Madden, whoever won wins the argument because it's like the postmodern version of casting straws. You
That's
know, like, "Oh,
true.
who's gonna be the 12th
That's
disciple?
well
Step
said.
in for
Yeah.
Judas." We're like, "Well, we'll let Madden, 2000, a good game here settle it." And one of them was whether Jesus, uh, had
Yeah.
nocturnal emissions.
Oh, jeez.
And
Wow.
but we used a different word, and that was
Yes.
in the original version of the book, and there had been a debate, and it had gotten edited, and I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
really know that it had been changed, so the first, book stop, I hadn't seen the physical book yet, so I get it, and I was reading the introduction, and that's in there, and I w I think I'd rather have said what I wrote than nocturnal emissions just sounded so, like, clinical that but then it was so funny that I came around to appreciating it.
Mm.
Um, but
No,
yeah,
that's
so
a
there's a
fun
whole host of things entailed in, an embrace of
yeah.
fleshliness that
Well,
I'm
let me
sure that was your 3rd point. When you were in that Ephesians Bible study, you were like, "As an aside."
as a no, but let me tell you, I what I did that leads me to a good, transition here. Look, segue. One of the implications for me is that over the last 10 to 15 years, I have grown to disdain closing my eyes when I pray. And it comes from this conviction that it's not in the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible are you supposed to close your eyes when you pray. Of all the postures of prayer that were given as precedent, none of them involve closing your eyes. So I'm pretty convinced that this is a fallout of two things. One is the Cartesian dualism and between body, right?
Yeah.
And what because some people chain it all the way back to Paul and they think that's what Paul was talking about in body and spirit. And so
Boo.
in order to be in order to be spiritual, you block out the natural world, the created order, right? And so because that's the physical, you close your eyes to block that out so you can focus on the internal, the spiritual. I,
Mhm.
I'm I'm almost convinced this is an implication of that Cartesian dualism. But I also think that it's a sly maneuver that Sunday school teachers came up with so that kids didn't bother each other during prayer. So you close your eyes and you bow your head and you fold your hands. I'm pretty sure this is a control mechanism for Sunday school, right? So I have about 15 years ago, I stopped closing my eyes when I pray. And instead, what I do is I try and find something that God created. So a tree, I always look out the window and try and find a tree. But what you don't realize is that in worship spaces, and maybe it's because of PowerPoint, but also stained glass windows, most congregations in their sanctuary have blocked out the natural world. Now, I know that wasn't true in Palos Verdes where you were, which looked out on the ocean, but in many, many worship spaces. So sometimes when I'm guest preaching or I'm visiting another church and it's time to pray, I struggle to find something to look at that God made. And so what I do is I actually pick a human
Mhm.
and I gaze on the wonder and the beauty of what God has made. And so let's say that there's a lovely gray-haired uh, grandmother of the church, right? And to just appreciate and adore the divine embodiment of what God has done in and through her life. So praying with my eyes open is one of for me the implications of this embrace of incarnation is that I am no longer interested in blocking out the natural world
Mm.
that God has made the physical, but to fully embrace it as a revelation, a sight of the divine.
Have you considered writing alternative lyrics to creeds with arms wide open? With eyes wide open.
I love it.
You know, because, I mean,
Hey,
Creed's
our
having its
emo friend
revival.
Our emo friend Joshua Patterson.
He's not gonna be happy I'm making Creed references. He's like, "Oh, that's too mainstream." Josh has there's a podcast for his Patreon group called the Emogelicals,
I just saw that.
and, yeah, I just, like, it is super niche, but he occupies all those niche spots. Um, but, at the beginning of the Creed song, see, this is why it came to mind, 'cause, he opens and he's like, "Well, I just heard the news today. It seems my life is gonna change." And see, but then he says, "I close my eyes." No, don't do that. Don't do that, Scotty. Scotty Stapp. Began to pray. You don't have to close your eyes because he found out he's going to be a dad. And
Oh.
tears of joy run down my face with eyes wide open. See, it's you could
Yeah.
help him out. You could help him out. I'm just saying.
Tripp, this is profound point that you're
And then
making.
we could sing it at camp next year.
There we go.
Alternative lyrics to "With
Alter
Arms Wide Open."
Nice.
But seriously, uh, the especially when you're in a group prayer, I think that is there. Sometimes in private, the close your eyes could be holding up people conceptually in your mind, right? Because they're not present.
Mm.
So you could try that. Like
Okay.
sometimes when I do like kindness meditations, then thinking about the individual and such helps. But underneath this though, that the Descartes thing, I do think the high quality incarnation theologies kind of insist about leaving dualism behind,
Yeah.
and embracing dual aspect monism. That's right, dual aspect monism, and really that just means like there's only one thing that's reality, a monism, but there's
Yeah.
two aspects, the physical and the mental, in this element, and so often, right, the closing of the eyes there would be a performance that, oh, to be spiritual is to cease being aware of
Yeah.
the rest of reality. But when all things have this dual aspect, the physical and the spiritual,
Yeah.
the opening of your eyes in prayer is actually like
Yeah.
attending to the presence of God, and then you're trying to orient your awareness
Yeah.
to recognize that aspect that is so often closed off to us, namely the depth dimension or the spiritual or whatever that's present in all things, and within us. But and when we close ourselves metaphorically or real, like our vision, and attend to the spirit as if it's attending to something apart from our own body and our
Yeah.
own relations and
Yeah.
the fleshly world, then we've already kind of like flattened the spirit, as if there was anything birthed in the core of God that doesn't have a future in the
Mhm.
very life of God. I mean, like that's you know the, that's a callback to all the other things you said there, Bo.
Remind me in the dipolar,
Hmm.
the process talks about there's the noumenal, and is it the
That's
phenomenological? What's the
Kant.
what?
Kant makes the phenomenal noumenal
Okay.
distinction.
What's the dipolar?
Yeah. So there's like the physical
Yeah.
and then the mental, depending on.
Oh, the mental. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I was asking because you know what the thing that when people our language fails us a lot when it comes to this stuff. And
Really,
so
I feel
people
like humans are really good at communicating, cooperating, and
So even the way we talk about a body, mind, and spirit or something like that, as if the mind isn't in a synergistic relationship with flesh, as if it's different than body. Because mind, right? That's the electric, right? The when your synapses are firing, but it's inside, right? The flesh of your brain and body. So even the way we talk about mental being different than body, anytime we partition up existence like that, I know that I'm always aware that it functions in some way. And what we need to be careful of is that we're not distancing so our mental life from our physical life as if they're two entirely different things instead of a dipolar existence, right? But in one I keep saying embodied because that's the theme for today, but one expression of enfleshment. That's the incarnation, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or an actual occasion, you know.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
love that language. Um, you can go, and then I have one more implication.
Um, well, I don't know. I think I said, let's see. I
Okay.
talked about the movement from partition to participation, escape,
Oh yes.
escaping the flesh to embracing the flesh. I don't know if I said that.
Mm.
From dualism to dual aspect monism, gnosis to theosis. Those were the four
Wow,
that
man.
I wrote down. It's fun. TNT episodes are fun. We barely tell each other what we're gonna say, and then before we start, like I'll return emails, and then I just normally in the morning. See, this is I'm ADHD, so like basically until lunch is the time where if Tripp's going to like read or write with deep focus until later in the day, like after kids go to bed, I do all the focusing things. So then on TNT days, I get whatever our topic is, anything I have to do before I do it, and then I just put the topic on the top of a piece of paper and just start writing junk down, trying to guess what Bo's going to talk about or things I might need to remember before we start. And those were the four there this time.
That's awesome. You know, that stuff comes to me when I'm doing dishes. I don't know why. There's something about like working with your hands that frees up that
Ooh,
mental space for creativity and flow. It's but the problem is then I try and write it down on a sticky note, but my hands are all wet. And
yeah,
so my sticky notes often look like wrinkled bacon.
dude, you got to get this app called Audio Pen.
Okay. I'm writing it down. Hold on.
Audio Pen. Um, so you just kind of talk into it when you got your little idea.
Yeah.
It transcribes it and then organizes your rant into like an
Wow.
organized thought. It uses AI to like make notes off your rant and organize it.
You know, you're just enough younger than me that this
Just
is
enough
the
younger.
third episode in a row you've given me an app. Last week it was Pocket Cast.
Well, yeah, that's just a podcast app. But
Oh,
but the fun part about Pocket Cast, if you get the nice version, it's only like $10 a year or something, but you can upload MP3s on it. Is this what I told you last time?
well, no,
Oh
they
yeah,
get
because of how many hours I listen, I
that's right.
upload
Yeah.
I use this app to make audiobooks of PDFs and then put them on that app and listen to them while I do dishes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, all right, there's one more implication, Christmas related that I think is
All right.
important. Or at least one, I should say. So in my field of practical theology or the practice of theology, one of the things that you will discover is that there are some Greek words that have fallen out of common usage, but which can be very helpful when talking about the practice of faith. So some people know words like Greek words like gnosis, right, as knowledge, or even Sophia as wisdom, right? And where we get philosophy, the Sophie is from there, wisdom. But there are other words for wisdom that have some relevance here. Catherine Keller is famous for talking about poiesis. Now, she uses it in a little bit different of a way than we do in our field of practical theology sometimes, which is like the knowledge that it takes to bring something to completion. So like plumbers and roofers have poiesis because they have to know how to finish the job so that it's actually watertight, right? So you can't get a roofing job 95% done. It's not done. That's not poiesis. There's a wisdom to know how to finish off, the flashing so that
Mhm.
it is entirely sealed, right?
Yeah, you don't want that drip.
No.
That's just for fashion.
So that's one kind of wisdom, but there's another kind that comes up a lot in my field that I think really applies when it comes to the topic of incarnation. And the word is phronesis. It's it's an
Ooh.
embodied wisdom.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons I love this word so much, and like
Hold on,
James
say
K,
it again.
phronesis. The more you know. So it's PHRO, phronesis. So James K. Smith uses the analogy of like when you're teaching a teenager to drive. This is why I thought you might like it. You know, everything is happening on the front register of their brain, right? The 10 and 2 and the rear view mirror and the side check and right shoulders and all that stuff. But after a while, when you are well practiced, in English, we might call it muscle memory, things become second nature. And that's an element of phronesis. It's an embodiment of the wisdom so that you're not thinking through everything. And eventually you get to the point where you have a tough day at work, you get in your car and you're thinking about how you should have told this person that, or you wish that person wasn't such a jerk or whatever. And you just find yourself back in your driveway, right? Your body has a wisdom in it where it knew how to get you home while your brain was doing something else. And I think when it comes to the life of faith, phronesis is the most vital concept that almost no one knows about. Because when you listen, one of the reasons I love being a part of a multi-gen congregation, and I lament how many of our churches are homogenous unit principles, HUP. Because in multi-generational churches, when you listen to those who are older than you, there's an embodied wisdom of the road that they have walked, and it's not on the front of their mind, it has sunk down into the cells of their bodies, right? Into their carcass, their carnitas. And they have a wisdom about things in life. Now, there's also benefit to listening to people who are younger than you because they know about apps and stuff. But and their experience of the world sometimes is illuminating to go, wait, why do we do that? And you're like, I don't know. But this phronesis, when it comes to Christmas, to me, the very fact of divine embodiment means that you can actually trade out, right? So let's take wisdom embodied, that's phronesis, but you can also do love incarnate. That's also Christmas. You can also do spirit enfleshed, right? They become movable parts. Once you have the formula set up of the embrace and embodiment of the divine, then you start to see that the logos, right? The word, the knowledge, information became flesh and dwelt among us. But love was also embodied in that person of Christ and, right, birthed through Mary. When Mary and Elizabeth talk to each other, they are talking about they're dreaming of the world being a different way and the powers and principalities, the governments of this world being overthrown, right? There is a validation that comes in the incarnation of logos, right? Of gnosis, knowledge embodied, of Sophia, of wisdom embodied, and of love, right? When you start to flesh out, pun intended, the implications of incarnation, it is an endless supply of possibilities, but all of which are enacted in us living out our beliefs and our faith. So it's head, heart, hands all working together as an expression of this abstract concept taking on flesh and being enacted, right? Employed in the service to a world that God loves very much.
Mhm.
I love this stuff, man.
Ooh, I do too. I like it. Quality material. So,
Quality material. Wait a minute, what do they call it? Content machine.
content machine. The you know, the the Annunciation text of where Mary and Elizabeth get together.
Yeah.
Um, I preached at one of the big cathedrals in Edinburgh, like the first time
Oh,
back from, after lockdown and stuff.
whoa.
And which means I hadn't really been in this big cathedral before. And I had no idea, they got like professional kids choir that goes to a private school and they're like awesome. And it's like, packed out. So, and if you're Episcopal and you've been in lockdown, like they haven't had the Eucharist, right? So like
Oh, yeah.
it's very full. But it was that text, and I I guess I just hadn't thought about how different the context was going to be,
Yeah.
So I was just doing a normal Tripp sermon, and and rather early on where I'm like retelling the story of Mary and Elizabeth, see there, and I say, and then JB in Elizabeth's belly is trying to throw JC and Mary's belly some pounds. So they're like, "Oh, what's up, cuz?" And you see, because you see about half of this giant cathedral full, half of them just are like, "Are we allowed to laugh? This is funny." And the others are like,
What?
"This guy teaches at the University of Edinburgh?" And I was like, he was just trying to throw his cousin some daps.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, I'm kind of glad I didn't, know
Yeah.
in advance, because there are a number of my fellow faculty members that were there that were like, "That is the only time JB giving JC daps will ever be mentioned from the pulpit."
A little irreverent for some.
And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a Baptist." I was already creeped out having to wear all these robes.
That same year, Tripp, that your story happened in, I had two profound things related to incarnation happen. The first is when we came out of over 2 years of lockdown for us West Coast Methodists, I had not been in the sanctuary with my congregation. And when I stood up to preach, I picked up my Bible, but I didn't think about the fact that for 2 years, I had been reading the scripture off of a Word document on a screen
Yeah.
that was illuminated. And when I picked up my Bible and I went to read it, I had it like in front of me and I started moving it out because I couldn't see the text. And apparently, in that 2 years of looking at a computer screen, my eyes had aged enough that I had the Bible out at arm's length trying to read it, and the whole congregation laughed. And I actually said the line, I said, "My carnitas is failing me."
Ooh.
Yeah. Second story, we go to take communion, and I didn't realize that there were some committed Methodists there who, by the way, Duke grads, who were so committed during a COVID lockdown. I had started doing this thing called inverted. I created an inverted litany for communion, where instead of saying there is one loaf and one body and then you break it, I would do the opposite. I would say, may our many loaves and pieces be made one. So I just inverted all of the imagery of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
normal communion.
It's like the reverse of that Didache line of everyone
Yeah.
bringing the flour from everyone together to make it.
Yeah. 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 So we're in the sanctuary again, and we're going to have regular old communion from the standard liturgy, right? The book of worship. And some people, when they came forward, were crying. So afterwards, I followed up with them, and one of them said, "I haven't taken communion in 2 years because I so believe in the presence of when we are at table, that communion has to be with others." So, like on communion weeks, when they were at home, they didn't participate in the inverted liturgy. They abstained and they hadn't had communion in 2 years because they were so committed to the imagery of the physical bread, the body. that the body of Christ has to be present in order to take communion. And I didn't realize that they had abstained for 2 years in a commitment to this physical expression of the imagery that we proclaim. It was for me, I was darn impressed, man.
Mhm. Yeah, there was something similar, serving at the cathedral, and, I realized I mean, I guess, like, my house had 2 ordained people in it, so I guess we were safe, though I'm not sure that would have stopped me. But where you realize, like, it was a fast that the pandemic became a fast for so many people that when you're sitting there serving it and you realize there large numbers of the people are tearing up before they even get, up to the front.
Wow. Wow. But just to bring this back, people so if you take communion for us, the first Sunday of the month after month, year after year, the surplus of meaning, to use a Ricoeur concept, is so layered with imagery, memory, but also I would say a tactile response to physically taking the bread because right it's an enacted narrative. So by physically taking the bread and then bringing it into your very self for the nourishment and sustenance to your physical body, that is for me, that's the incarnation, that's the embodiment, right? The enfleshment of an idea, a historical concept, a theological abstract enacted and embodied. For me, like this is the beauty of what we do.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. I agree.
And that's why I love Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, Bill, what's your favorite Christmas movie?
Probably Christmas Vacation.
Ah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably, like, a personality test
I was gonna say.
that
I love Clark Griswold so much.
yeah, it's one of the ones we watch every year, but the I just I laugh so much at that thing.
I know that you're not supposed to try and assign someone else their Enneagram number, but I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that he is a fellow 7 wing 8.
Oh, there you go.
That's my bet on Clark Griswold. He is an optimist and a cheerleader and an enthusiast. Unless something goes wrong, then he's a nightmare. And I identify with him so so much.
Oh, man. Alright, so I next time we should, I don't even remember all the topics, but we did a one year we did a TNT, like, New Year's resolution podcast,
Okay.
and I believe Tim Burnett joined us, and this was the famous, Boza, "This year I'm giving up" podcast, and it was one of the funniest podcasts that I would have to listen to it again to know what happened. I just remember s the deciding how much of Tim and I laughing we were taking out, but why I thought of it, it was like we were talking, going through stuff, and you could tell, you went into your 8 mode,
Yeah.
and you were like, "This year, I'm just giving up."
Man, I'll
Graduate school does that to people.
I was gonna say I had lost my mother. I was having a struggle at my job. My degree program, my doctoral program was bumpy, and my wife's health was struggling, and all those things came together in a very melancholy season.
Well, I'm glad it got you to giggle right now. I didn't see if I'd known the context for why you said it, then I
Ah,
might not have even brought it up. I just thought to myself, "This is one of the funniest things," and and of course, Tim being the kind pastoral, uh, man is like, doing follow-ups and trying to encourage you and whatever,
He is
and you were having none of it. You're like, "No, no,
yeah,
I'm not saying I'm against anything good happening. I'm just I'm not betting on it. I give up." And
and I was
it
serious
reminds me of that
too.
at the end of Christmas Vacation when Clark Griswold goes in that giant rant about his boss, and
Yep,
then he's like, "And you know, if no one's got me a Christmas present yet, you know what I would like?" Like,
yeah,
wrapped up with a bow on it. And then, of course, Cousin Eddie's just like,
yeah,
"Oh,
good idea.
reasonable." Uh, oh, man, that is mm, yeah,
That is a very quotable rant. There are several lines in there that I hear referenced from time to time
yeah,
in the culture.
there's it is a litany. It is a litany.
Yep,
Like, if you pulled together like, that time period, there was like, a number of movies that has someone lose it in a rant like that,
yeah.
like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles has one, but
Yes.
I feel like there should be just, like, a montage of '80s comedies with the dad losing it, and, uh, and just be like, "Oh, will there be a battle of the rants?" But, yeah.
What it's a yearly tradition that, at some point, I will walk in and my wife will be watching the old movie, I think it's called White Christmas,
Mhm.
and Danny Kaye is in it, and that's what Clark references in that rant, and I always say to her, "Is that Danny Kaye?" It's like an ongoing joke, and she'll go, "Don't do it. Don't say it." And then I start the rant.
Oh, man. I think I the grandmother who can't
Yeah?
hear, and they are like, "Give
Oh,
me a
yeah,
grace,"
she
just starts doing the Pledge of Allegiance.
ah,
And
oh,
then
we should have a watch along. Next year, let's watch the movie. We'll have a watch along party.
Alright. I I mean,
Sounds good.
I can watch it multiple times. Back when you watch TV and then you just kinda be flipping channels and then
Yeah,
TBS was showing it.
yeah,
So, I watch it in its entirety most years, but
yeah,
the number of times I've watched 20-minute clips just because you're flipping channels, you're like, "Oh,"
yep,
he's, like,
yeah, if you
gonna
yeah,
test out the
you can
new
jump in at
grease
almost
on his
yeah, you can jump in at almost any part of that movie. Unlike your other favorite movie, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which
well,
some
if you
people,
have it
by the
all
way
memorized, you can kinda
oh, interesting. Some people are trying to do the Die Hard thing where they're saying that Lord of the Rings is a Christmas movie.
oh, it's a Christmas movie, but not in, like, the classical
Yeah,
sense, but if a reasonable human should watch the extended edition trilogy each holiday season,
mhm,
but, it is on December 25th where the Fellowship leaves, Rivendell to
yeah,
begin the journey to Mordor, which is just, like, the most appropriate signal that at least Fellowship of the Ring is a Christmas movie,
mm.
and,
They're
so I'm
elves
yeah, there are elves
who give gifts.
and a dude with a beard, uh
April Joy put out this list. I saw and it made me laugh.
Yeah, there's also a 3.5-hour podcast of me talking about the movie trilogy as a
Oh.
Christmas film,
Oh, funny.
from a couple I don't know how long, maybe last year or the year before or something, but, Nick Polk, who you met at, camp,
Yeah.
who's a big Tolkien nerd, and Craig Boyd, who was there, who's, also they did the Tolkien session at Theology Beer Camp. The 3 of us got on there. I think we're gonna do one about the new War of the Rohirrim film
Okay.
because, it's a reason to talk about Tolkien, really. This you know,
Tripp, I have a phone call that I need to take, so I am gonna step away.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom
All
because
right.
I drank a lot of coffee.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Alrighty.
All right, buddy.
Alrighty, Bo. I hope you find yourself